a wing that tricks the air into thinking it isn't there, a power delivery pattern on a telemetry screen that made Lewis Hamilton stop mid-sentence, and a team that looked at their Melbourne data on Sunday night, and by Monday morning had reversed every decision they'd made the week before. This is not a story about one upgrade. This is the story of Ferrari finding a loophole inside the 2026 regulations that nobody else had the nerve to touch. A driver in his second year at Ferrari who may have just hit the form of his life, in the most technically demanding car he has ever driven, and a Mercedes power unit advantage that Hamilton understood better than anyone in the paddock, because he spent 15 years building it. The question isn't whether Ferrari can close the gap to Mercedes. The real question is, what if the Macarena Wing makes that gap disappear before Mercedes even realizes it's gone? Start in Melbourne, because that's where this story begins. Ferrari left Australia with a 10 km/h straight-line deficit in qualifying. On Shanghai's 1.2 km back straight, one of the longest circuits on the calendar, that number doesn't just hurt your lap time. It decides races before they start. And after the race, Hamilton was in the Ferrari garage going through comparative telemetry, 15 years inside Mercedes. He knows that data better than the people who built the car. What he saw on Russell's power trace didn't sit right. Here's what you need to understand about 2026 power units. The MGUH, the heat recovery system that teams spent a decade mastering, is completely gone this season. The entire electrical battle now runs through a single component, the MGUK. And in 2026, that MGUK has nearly tripled in output, up to 350 kilowatts of electrical power feeding directly into the drivetrain. But here's where it gets interesting. The 2026 regulations built in a specific rule around this. The chasing car gets a deployment boost of electrical energy all the way up to 337 kilometers an hour. The leading car's MGUK power starts to taper off at 290. The idea was to help overtaking, create natural DRS without the flap. What Hamilton spotted on that telemetry screen was Mercedes sustaining power delivery in a way that didn't match what you'd expect from that taper rule. The curve stayed higher for longer, like the system was managing its energy across the lap differently, harvesting more efficiently, keeping the battery in a thermal window where it could deploy harder, later, without hitting the regulation ceiling. He told Ferrari's engineers directly, Mercedes is doing something with how they manage the MGUK energy cycle during the lap. The redistribution pattern is different from everyone else on the grid. The FIA ran checks after Melbourne. No irregularities found. But the language in the technical reports used one phrase that stuck. Legal, but potentially revolutionary. So Ferrari faced a clean problem. You cannot copy software. You cannot replicate thermal management systems built across months of bench testing by reading a competitor's telemetry. You cannot match what you cannot touch. So you build something untouchable yourself. Let me explain what the Macarena Wing actually does, because the way it works is genuinely unlike anything we've seen before. Every 2026 car runs active aerodynamics. In the regulations, it's called X mode and Z mode. Straight line, the wing opens to shed drag. Corner entry, it closes to rebuild downforce. Standard. Every team on the grid interprets this the same way. The standard approach is to open a flap, reduce the angle, cut the drag. Think of it as a more sophisticated version of the old DRS system. Same principle, more integrated. Ferrari did something different. Instead of simply opening the upper flap elements to reduce drag, they invert them. The flap profile flips to generate lift rather than downforce on the straight. And what that does is extraordinary. It doesn't just reduce the wing's drag. It actively tricks the air into behaving as if the wing isn't there at all. The airflow sees lift where it expects resistance. The pressure differential that normally holds the car down on the straight, gone. The car doesn't just cut through the air more efficiently. It essentially disappears aerodynamically at high speed. And underneath the car, that flip triggers a stall in the diffuser, the same effect that gave teams massive straight-line speed advantages in previous eras when teams figured out how to stall their rear diffusers intentionally. Less suction from the floor, less drag, more speed. Fred Vasseur nicknamed it the Macarena because the flap movement looks like the arm gestures from the dance. Everyone laughed. The straight-line numbers from Bahrain testing were not a laughing matter. 5 to 8 km/h gain on Shanghai's back straight, projected from the 5 laps at Co. completed on Hamilton's car during the second Bahrain test in February. The paddock noticed immediately. So did the FIA. The inverted profile required an extended approval process before it could legally race. 3 specifications are being shipped to Shanghai. Not 1. 3. Because the actuation timing, the precise millisecond the flap inverts and returns, still has open questions under sustained race conditions. Minor latencies appeared in Bahrain testing. Reports from Maranello suggest the team spent the intervening weeks running 24-hour simulations to make sure the system snaps back the instant a driver touches the brake pedal. And they are introducing this on a sprint weekend. 60 minutes of free practice. No room to find problems slowly. Vasseur said on Sunday that updates for China would be difficult. By Monday, that was reversed. The Melbourne deficit made caution an unaffordable luxury. Now Hamilton. And this framing matters, because he is not a new driver at Ferrari anymore. Hamilton completed his first full season with the team in 2025. He knows the garage, the engineers, the culture. What changed this winter was the car underneath him, completely. The 2026 regulations brought a new era that the paddock is calling the nimble car concept. Reduced downforce, more mechanical grip. Cars that move under braking require active energy management on every corner and demand a completely different mental model from the driver. This is not about adapting to a new team. This is about mastering a new species of racing car, one that nobody on the grid has driven before this season. And in Melbourne, the telemetry told a very specific story about where Hamilton stands with the SF26. His throttle application in Australia was the most aggressive of any driver on the grid. Not Leclerc, not Verstappen, Hamilton. He was attacking the fast corners at Albert Park with a level of commitment that only exists when a driver has complete trust in the front end of the car beneath him. Multiple sources inside the paddock confirmed that Vasseur and Leclerc were both surprised, not in qualifying, not in the race, but in the very first practice session of the weekend. Hamilton was already at a level with the 2026 car that the timeline didn't suggest was possible yet. And here is the number that gives that context its full weight. Ferrari still didn't have the fastest car in Melbourne. Mercedes had roughly half a second of pace advantage. Hamilton and Leclerc were already performing at this level in a car that wasn't the quickest on the grid, which means the ceiling for this combination, this driver, this team, this development trajectory, has not been tested yet. The dynamic between the two drivers amplifies everything. Leclerc has the natural connection with the SF26 that comes from shaping its development from day one. Hamilton brings the engineering feedback quality that 15 championship years inside a works team produces, both pushing the car in the same direction simultaneously. Development doesn't add up when that happens. It compounds. 3 things are running in parallel at Ferrari right now, and all 3 point the same direction. The Macarena Wing is being rushed to a sprint weekend ahead of schedule because the Melbourne deficit made waiting unacceptable. The aero gap to Mercedes needed an answer this weekend, not in Miami. A full engine architectural redesign is already in development, targeting Monza in September. The FIA changes its compression ratio testing rules in June. Whatever interpretation is contributing to Mercedes' current MGUK advantage closes at that point. Ferrari's upgraded engine arrives into a regulatory landscape that has already shifted in their favor. And 2 of the most experienced drivers on the grid are extracting performance from the same car at the same time with no ceiling yet found. Vasseur's words after Melbourne were deliberate, not to match Mercedes eventually, not to be competitive by mid-season, to reach them as quickly as possible. Every team's upgrade picture heading into Shanghai, because this weekend is bigger than just Ferrari. Ferrari, Macarena rear wing, 3 specifications. Upper flap elements invert to generate lift on the straight, tricking the airflow and stalling the diffuser. Works as a package with the exhaust wing concept. 5 to 8 km/h projected straight line gain. The most significant single update of the 2026 season so far. Mercedes, refined MGUK energy management software following Melbourne. Updated cooling architecture for the hybrid thermal system, targeting sustained power delivery across a full race distance rather than concentrated bursts. Protecting the advantage Hamilton identified on that telemetry screen. Red Bull, thermal management fix after Hadger's engine fire in Australia. Revised power unit cooling package. Verstappen's P6 from the back of the grid in Melbourne showed the chassis is already competitive. Reliability is the priority this weekend before performance development resumes. McLaren updated floor package targeting the low-speed traction zones where they visibly lost ground to Ferrari in Melbourne. Running the Mercedes customer MGUK, but unable to replicate the works team's energy deployment integration. Revised software mapping is part of the Shanghai package alongside the floor. Aston Martin, revised front wing assembly, and updated brake cooling ducts. Focused on improving entry stability into Shanghai's long Turn 1 complex. The Snail, where preseason simulation flagged minimum corner speed as a weakness. Alpine, new rear diffuser package, and updated sidepod inlet geometry. Targeting straight-line speed improvement after running one of the highest drag configurations in Melbourne qualifying. Williams, revised floor edge and updated tire preparation procedures following graining issues in Melbourne's cooler conditions. Conservative step, focus on understanding Shanghai's very different track surface before committing to larger development. Haas, updated bargeboard area and revised suspension geometry settings. Incremental step with budget managed carefully toward the European swing later in the season. Sauber, new rear wing specification, higher downforce configuration for Shanghai's technical first sector. Trading some straight-line speed for improved stability through the Snail complex at turns 1 through 4. Racing Bulls, revised front wing in-plate geometry and updated DRS actuation system. Reliability focus after power unit concerns in Melbourne. Performance upgrade moved to the next European round.